Okay, everybody, we're in week 14 of our 15 weeks, and this is our review week. We're going to go over all the things we learned, or at least some of the important highlights of what we learned in the last 13 weeks, and prep you for the final so that you all end on a strong note. Let's start with just asking a really simple question. Why are we going to review? Well, why we review, we have to put stuff into context, right? You can learn individual things, but until you put them all together, they really don't have the context you need to apply them. So you may have found bits and pieces of the course that you say, well, I could probably use that, or others that you probably said, I'll never use that at all. But when you put it into context and we go through an entire semester in a quick review, you'll realize how the pieces fit together. It gives us a chance to reflect on why any of this might be important to us, and again, in context, to put it into our own context during that reflection. We're going to repair a little bit. We're going to fill in any empty spaces. I may say something in this lecture that you just didn't catch the last time, or I may say it differently to where it clicks. It's always a good opportunity to fill in any empty spaces when we review, and then you'll just feel more confident when you go into your final exam, and hopefully when you go into that first real job in your practice, you'll feel more confident because you know some stuff. So let's start at the very beginning. We met each other in our face-to-face classes or in our first introduction online. And remember, when you're a manager, no matter what you're managing or leading, getting to know people and getting people to know each other in a group environment is hugely important. It reaps big rewards, and I saw that when you did breakout sessions, the last in-person class. Everybody kind of knew each other, even though we'd only met, 3 times in the past. It was as if you'd been in a class together for quite some time, and some of you didn't know others in the class. So I think just getting to know people and, talking things like our catch-up, right? Our check-in at the beginning of each of our in-person classes where we just kind of talked about what's good, what's bad, what's going on in everybody's lives. That stuff matters. And so when you do manage, understand that just knowing people, just getting to know a little bit about your people is hugely important. We went over the syllabus, so everybody knew the rules. And in some cases, they weren't rules that really worked in your favor. In other cases, they were. But everybody knew the rules. And how can we use this in practice? Well, when people get to know each other and get to know the rules, that's what security awareness is all about. And there are literally billions of dollars spent in security awareness programs in both the cyberspace and the physical space, and safety awareness programs. If you add those in, then we're talking probably hundreds of billions of dollars. But it's all about getting to know people, what their habits are, what their likes and dislikes are, and then playing to those to get people to understand what you want them to do. So although it may have seemed a little bit like, 10 minutes at the beginning of each class to just say what's going on with everybody, I think it put us more at ease, and it would be easier for me to teach you and easier for you to learn once you understand the comfort level and that the fact that the person who's teaching you or the people that you're teaching know a little bit about you. So I think that beginning is something that's a takeaway no matter where you manage, and I'll stop preaching about it now, but understand that you really want to know something about your team. We spent the first several weeks talking about enterprise security risk management in the physical security space. And realistically, the takeaways from that are that everybody participates. You as the security manager, no matter what specialty you have, cannot even begin to know all the risks and threats to your organization. The people who handle the resources, be it physical resources or data, know what keeps them up at night. You can't possibly know that. So trying to develop a security program solely based on, a cookie cutter approach will give you a okay program. And none of you want an okay program. Okay programs have problems because people find ways around them. So when you talk to each department and they're able to express their risks and threats to you, then you have a better understanding of what you need to do to mitigate those threats. That's the big takeaway. There's some examples here for HR, EHS, R&D, supply chain, IT, finance, different types of risks and threats to those organizations. I'm not going to read them to you here. The slide's available, obviously. But understand that the basis of enterprise security risk management is that the security manager can't possibly know everything that needs to be protected. and know where it is and know if it's properly protected. The owners of those resources understand that, and you must engage with them. You also need to understand that ESRM is a continuous improvement program. Continuous improvement program. You plan the program. You build it with both hard and soft elements, meaning you might have physical barriers, you might have firewalls, all those types of things, and then soft elements, understanding, making sure people understand that those things are there for their protection, that they shouldn't bypass them, right? So you can have a hard and fast piece of software that disables the use of any thumb drives. People will find a way around that until you tell them that this is why you did it. So you need both hard and soft elements. Monitoring, right? Partner feedback, talking about whether things are working or not working. You put a security mitigation in place and it impedes operations. You tell people that they must use double authentication in everything they do. That's always a smart IT principle. But if you want things to work quickly, if you are in a particular industry that needs quick response, that every 15 minutes you can't stop and ask people to re-enter their password. If they're doing computer-assisted surgery on your brain, do you really want them to stop in the middle and then reset their password and then go to their cell phone for the code and enter it? I will tell you that, my brain is not all that big and it's not all that complex, but I just wouldn't want that interruption from my surgeon any more than you would. So you need to, get partner feedback. And then you need to adjust. Every plan goes into effect, and it's not perfect. In fact, perfection is the enemy of good. You start with a plan, you do your best, and then you go back with that feedback, and you practice it, and you respond to those and adjust to those things that don't work, and then go back to plan. So it's a circle, and it's a continuous improvement model. So over the next several slides, I list some of those partners we studied. I did not list them all. And some of the shared risks that they may have, some of the security risks that they may have, even though they're not a security organization. So HR has risks, background checks. If you don't do a good background check, if it's not verified, if you're not sure who you're hiring, you could make a bad hire. That could be trouble in the workplace. The whole idea of the background check is so you don't have future problems and have to replace that person. And if you're doing investigations, which HR does, as well as security and even safety and cybersecurity, forensic people, everybody participates in some form of investigations. If they're not done properly, that could mean lawsuits. And if security is helping HR with those, you need to do them well. The intake methods, right? Security normally has an intake method when somebody wants to report something that's a security problem. HR generally has something. A compliance division generally has a hotline you call. We talked a little bit about those anonymous hotlines. Can you imagine if the partners all took in different cases or the same case? The person called HR, and they weren't quite sure that HR was going to be able to help them even though they explained it. So then they called security. And then they call the compliance hotline because they want it recorded and they want to make sure that nobody drops it. And none of those organizations talk to each other. You could go off on 3 separate investigations. So as a partner, you need to make sure HR especially, and anyone else who might be engaged in investigations, understands that if there's something that could be a crossover, that there's, who's going to work this kind of discussion goes on. And when you discuss those shared risks, you can have shared mitigations. It could very well be that, HR is concerned about a bad background check because they don't want to hire somebody who they have to let go 3 months down the line when this comes out and find out they're not eligible to work with, say, money or information or drugs. In my case, certain people have been barred from working with pharmaceuticals by Health and Human Services due to, any number of issues in their past. And if HR hires those people, then when it comes out and they don't do a background check on that, they're going to have to get rid of them. There's no way they could keep them. But in the meantime, they could be robbing me blind of controlled substances that I'm responsible for the security of, right? Or at least responsible for working with the people who own those products. And so we can share the mitigation by saying, let's both look at the background check. You do it from this lens, and I'll do it through that lens, and somebody else may do it through another lens, and we all then come to an agreement whether this person is eligible to hire. So when you have shared risk, you can also have some shared mitigations that make your program stronger. We discussed finance as a partner, and one of the big things was purchasing and procurement. When people are spending other people's money, they tend to get sloppy and sometimes they get dishonest. And so finance as a partner with security is a very, very good thing, especially when people are buying things. I think I used the example of a guy that very early in my career, he was purchasing things like night vision goggles. Well, the procurement person really didn't know much about the science that was going in the laboratory. It was a research laboratory, and said, oh, maybe night vision goggles are something you use to do an experiment in the dark for some chemical that's light sensitive, right? Could be a good reason. This guy was ordering them in large quantities, and come to find out he was a member of a militia group who wanted these for their paramilitary purposes. So partnering with finance and having them comfortable calling you and having you explain to them what might be warning signs is a very good thing. But then we also went through some basic finance as a manager, very low level stuff, basic budgeting methods. Remember, there's line item budgets where you take last year's budgets and you go through each line to see whether you underspent or overspent and adjust accordingly. Or zero-based, where you just start with what are the functions of my department, and I want to get a fresh cost for every one of them. Line item is generally used year to year. With about every third to fifth year, you do a zero-based to make sure that you're not just throwing good money away and adding more to it each year. This was designed to give you familiarity, not expertise as a finance person. But hopefully that was something that you could work with. We spent an entire week this semester with IT as a partner. I normally couple that with another organization, but we had so many IT and InfoSec and cybersecurity majors in the class, I thought it was a good idea for us to do this. And the one word that you guys should remember is convergence. It is becoming more and more practical and more common, at least in mid to smaller size organizations, that security is security, that the cybersecurity or physical security person leads both organizations. You might have a physical security person who leads 2 or 3 cybersecurity persons, depending on the mission of the organization, whether it's, data sensitive or data intensive or not. I mean, a nonprofit organization probably doesn't have a full-blown cybersecurity department of hundreds. I mean, we could be talking, some of the big charities, but a mid-sized charitable organization probably has 2 or 3 people because people are making donations online. So you're handling money online. They do need some cybersecurity, but their particular charity may be something that is controversial, right? Wrong or right, controversy just means that somebody doesn't like what you're doing. Let's take an organization like Planned Parenthood. It is a controversial organization. I'm not saying it's good or bad. Don't paint me in that corner, right? But what I'm saying is that there are people definitely that find what they do to be wrong, and others that are really ardent supporters. Their physical security is a huge part of that organization. They have a very robust physical security plan and people assigned to it. Cybersecurity, not much different than other charitable organizations. Most of their donors are large, just like most charities, and they're mostly direct. They're not done online, with a credit card, but they'll need a few. And that organization has a converged security department where they work under one security leader. So convergence is something that you probably should remember if you're an IT person. We talked about the different things that IT is responsible for, and then we went down a list of shared risks under each one of those things. I'm just going to ask you to review that. If this is something that interests you when you're doing your homework for your outline, then it's probably good for you to know what some of the shared risks are in the ESRM model and how you would address them together. The same thing applies for facilities and engineering partners. They are responsible, generally speaking, for the biggest part of capital budgets in most organizations, unless that organization is very specialized. Microsoft, obviously, the IT department has the biggest budget, probably bigger than payroll. Payroll is normally biggest in every organization, but a place like Microsoft or Google would probably have a very robust IT budget and still a fair engineering budget because they need to build data centers and facilities. But here are some of the responsibilities of facilities and engineering, and some of those shared responsibilities between security, facilities, and engineering, and some of the ways that they overlap. And that way you might have some shared responses and some shared mitigations. From there, we jumped into the regulatory environment, and we talked about regulations, standards, internal controls, and trade secrets. If you remember correctly, regulations are basically legal reasons why you would do something. If you are in the sugar business and you are going to sell sugar by the pound, each bag of sugar, needs to weigh 1 pound. It can't be slightly less or slightly more unless you mark it that's, as such that there may be variances, and even then it could get you into trouble. You couldn't say it's a pound of sugar. That is a regulation. You could get yourself jammed up and be fined, or in some cases jailed if you don't follow a regulation. Standards are those that are imposed normally by a trade organization, right? So if you are saying you have a program that is ISO certified in something, right? It is endorsed by, it has the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, and you got that on all your advertising, and then you change your process and don't do it the way you used to do it, you could lose that, and in a very public way, that organization would come back and tell your customers that you are no longer able to use that badge of advertising, that ISO standard, that certification by Better Business Bureau or Good Housekeeping or something along that line. So standards are very important because you've adhered to them. You've voluntarily said, I will meet this standard. And then when you don't, you have to go back to your customers and say you haven't. And the organization that sets that standard, you normally sign an agreement with them that if you don't meet the standard, they can charge you a penalty. Internal controls, I think we use the example of Kentucky Fried Chicken and the 8 herbs and spices, right? People expect the chicken at every Kentucky Fried Chicken to be the same. Can you imagine if one of them used one form of breading on their chicken and another one used something totally different? Then when you're on the road and you're stopping for something, you have to consider, is that a good Kentucky Fried Chicken with the one recipe that I like, or is that the other one with the one I hate? Internal controls have a customer quality consideration. The customer always knows that if they're buying Kentucky Fried Chicken, it's going to taste the same, be it in Detroit or in Dubai. We talked about trade secrets, and trade secrets are generally hard to enforce. Every company has some level of trade secrets, their secret sauce that helps them be successful over competitors. And people generally will sign when they come to work for a company that has trade secrets, saying that they will keep those trade secrets even after they leave and will not share them with competitors. It happens a lot. You can't unring the bell. Once you know how to do something, it's very hard not to do it that way if it's very efficient and very lucrative to do so. But trade secrets are very hard to defend. And if you want more information on that, go back to the reading on trade secrets. But just know that just because something's a trade secret doesn't mean it doesn't get violated on a regular basis. The only way for you to know what regulation, standards, internal controls affect your operation in the place where you're going to be a manager is to ask others. Just like you don't know exactly what needs to be defended and how robustly it needs to be defended, you can't know everything that needs to be protected, or every regulation, standard, or internal control that must be adhered to so that you can continue to make good products. You need to ask those things. So the regulatory environment definitely goes with ESRM because you need to talk to people, which is the basis of ESRM. Talking with people about the shared risks, about their threats, what they worry about, and then helping them mitigate that as the security expert. From there, post-midterm, we shifted to external partners. And we talked about what the police think of security, and that was rather dismal, rather disappointing. But you must know it, if you're going to go into this game, that many police do not respect security. As I've told you before, I've never met a cop in their 10th or 15th year that didn't want to become a security manager because they found out it pays more and it's Monday through Friday normally, although that's a bit of a misnomer. They see it as something easier. And so they always want to be a security manager, but they tend not to like security managers. I think in their head, they're going to do it differently, which, power to them if that's what they think. But you have to understand what that relationship is because you'll be working with police. And even though they may come across as, in a partnership mode, you need to be somewhat guarded. We saw the different operating models, right? Whether it's ad hoc or whether it's a property model, different models that Sari and Pressler put out for us really do have an impact on how you're going to work with police. And you should consider, once you set foot on that first job, understanding what the local police are like, their reputation, right? And how much your company's tolerance is for you cooperating with the police, and stick with that model and let the police know that this is why you're doing it. It has, in many cases, you're not going to tell them I don't do it because I don't trust you, right? But you can say the company's policy is that if indeed you want records, we will provide them, but you'll need to get a subpoena or a warrant for the information. It's nothing personal. We're going to make sure that when you ask for it, we preserve it, we get it ready. It's ready for you to take and for us to hand over to you, but we'll need that piece of paper. So the different models, I think that was kind of an interesting discussion that we had in class about that. I think everybody came back with different ways of looking at it. Some looked at a very simplistic model on the property model. That's good. That's fine. Others thought an ad hoc was better, where you could share certain things in certain situations and spelling those things out ahead of time. Another good idea. But just understand one or two models that you think are good and be able to explain what they mean. We talked about the layout and the planning for a security team. Many people really like the idea of proprietary, direct employees of the company being the security people, but know that you take on all the liability when you take on proprietary people. With a contract, or even a hybrid, you can shift some of that liability to the contracting company. If a guard does something outside of their training, and you are contracted, and the guard company in the contract was responsible for training, then legal liability will shift to the guard company and not to you. If they're your own people and they did something and they should have been trained and they weren't, you're on the hook for it. So the contract model has its benefits for sure. What you have to be careful of, though, are co-employment issues. Very easy, because you see those guards every day, to start thinking of them as your employees. And when you do that, then you give them guidance that may be contrary to what their employer would want them to have, or it may just come back on you when something goes wrong that you told them to do it this way, even though they were trained to do it a different way. And then you reassume that liability because of the co-employment issues. Also remember, you don't pay them. And if you start to get involved in their pay issues with their company, then they can come back and ask for pension or other benefits if indeed they lose their job. We spent a week talking about business enablement, which is relatively new in the last 10, 15, even 20 years, and that's new in the scheme of history because everybody used to swim in their own lane. Now the models are, if someone is better positioned to do a job, then they should do that job, if at all possible, as long as it doesn't detract from their core mission, which is the big thing. If it detracts from your core job, then it's not a good fit. But can security salt sidewalks, check safety systems like emergency lighting, AED machines on the wall, fire hoses and fire extinguishers, take HVAC readings, heating, ventilation, air conditioning readings for the engineering department, so they don't have to send somebody out? Why not? If they're already doing rounds, if they're already passing these things, in the course of their duties, why not? Just remember, business enablement is a way for you to get closer to your customer, to have a common mitigation, if you will, not just for a security problem in this case, but now you're mitigating one of their other issues, perhaps saving them money or making their operation more efficient. As long as it doesn't impact your core mission, you should consider taking on something to enable your business overall to be more embedded with your organization. We spent a week online and 1 week in the classroom talking about leadership versus management. Remember, these are verbs, not nouns. Management isn't a group of people. Management is a way of doing things. And leadership is following through on your plans and rules. You have rules in place, and if you're practicing good leadership, you're making sure those rules are enforced and everybody's aware of them and everybody's going by those rules. Management means just having those rules in place. So do you have the right infrastructure, the right rules written down? Are they in a place where everybody can get to them and they are properly socialized? Remember, both are necessary. If you have the rules written down, but nobody's enforcing them, then that's poor leadership. If you are always telling people, don't do this, don't do that, you're watching them very carefully to make sure that they're doing the right thing, but they don't know what the right thing is because it's never written down anywhere or it's not socialized, they've never been told, that's poor management. You have to have one in tandem with the other for this entire thing to work. The G4S case showed us what happens when leadership and management collide. And in many cases, it was a multi-pronged issue. There were rules written down about hiring, but branch managers, in an effort to hire people quickly to fill posts, ignored them. In many cases, things weren't written down properly, so there was nothing for anybody to follow. There was very little regulations, and we know that in only just a few places in the United States are there any regulations about physical security workers and security guards in general. And so the government wasn't helpful in preventing some of the issues that took place with G4S employees, including mass shootings and rapes. Background checks and screening are key to help prevent these things. And if you're working under a contract, you need to make sure that your contractor understands that those need to be refreshed occasionally, and you're going to monitor that they are done. If in nothing else, having them send you something in writing for each and every employee saying that their background is clear as of what date. Be specific in contracts. That is your protection. You can't, generally speaking, you can't be leadership and management to a contract company. You can do it in your own backyard, and you should. But if you're going to contract anything out, be very specific that their management rules can be audited, and they are responsible for making sure they are adhered to, and you put that in writing in contracts. And we ended our semester with a unit on networking, and generally speaking, cybersecurity students hate that unit. That's okay. We can't like everything. However, normally they don't like it because they already have LinkedIn pages and they're already active networking, so what do they need this for? Well, if nothing else, you met 2 new friends if you did your homework, and it's worth it. Connections help you in many ways. You can stay current on legal and regulatory changes. Someone in LinkedIn or some other network you belong to, be it a trade organization, any type of networking organization can make you aware of changes in regulations. Someone will bring up something that you'd not heard of before. It will pique your interest and you'll do more research. You can look for references on suppliers and prospective hires. I can't tell you how many times I've reached out to somebody on LinkedIn, and that's the one I primarily use. I'm not advertising for them because there are other places, but I will reach out to somebody and say, hey, I just got an application from Bill Jones. It says here he worked for you. You and I have known each other for years. What can you tell me about Bill? Perfectly legal to ask that question. Keeps you current on new products and technologies. No question that salespeople will want to network with you, and that's okay because that's how you're going to hear about changes in the field. It gives you an unvarnished view of prospective new hires, again, by calling your contacts or by looking at their social media, their business social media page, and seeing that it doesn't match their resume in some ways. It can at least open up questions in the interview process to say, it says that you were with ABC Company from 2006 to 2009, but it also says in your resume that 2006 to 2010 you worked for XYZ Company. Did you hold 2 jobs? Is there an issue? And you didn't mention XYZ Company at all on your resume, but it's on your LinkedIn page. Did you work there? And if so, why isn't it on your resume? Could be a very good reason. The job was only a couple of days. I realized I didn't like it and I left. That happens, and sometimes people don't put a couple-day job on their resume, and I don't know that I would either. I'm not suggesting anybody lie on their resume, and lying through omission can get you into trouble just as much as anything else, but, frankly, I don't have every job I've ever worked on my resume. I do for the last 35 years, but, I don't have all my high school jobs on there unless they're relevant to the position, and there are schools of thought on resumes that tell you should only put down jobs that are relevant to the position or education that is relevant to the position. I don't know whether that's the way to go, but again, networking will help you weed people out or include people based on things that they may not have told you about themselves. It helps you with new job prospects, and that's where every one of you should be looking at it for right now, which is why those 2 new friends could just pan out to be the one that hires you. So if you didn't like the assignment, hold your nose and turn it in. But hopefully be helpful. And it does, to some extent, provide a social outlet. I have, probably bonded with people that I've connected with in different ways over the years. Some have become very close friends. So, if that's important to you, and that's one way that you meet people with common interests, then by all means, there's nothing wrong with social media in that context. So reflection is a very important part of my own practice. Not everyone does it. I will say that it's something that came from my Jesuit education in my doctorate program, where it's very important in that school of thought to reflect on your day, to reflect on things so that you can make improvements and understand yourself a little better. You're going to apply the things we learned or not, but hopefully there's at least one or two things you will apply. And I'd like you to reflect on that. How will you do that? What things did you find impactful? And what things were least impactful to you? And that's okay too, so that you understand that, I know that, that's part of the checking of the box, but that part really did not help me much. I'd like you to reflect on what was good about the study of security management, even if you're not a physical security person, even if your major is separate from security. There are engineering and safety majors in the course. This is probably an elective for you, and that's okay. What did you find good about the study? And what things could have been done better? Because I will ask you that, and there will be obviously student evaluations, and I'd like to hear what can be done better so that I can become better at my job. So that was the down and dirty review. I would strongly suggest you look at these slides, print them out if you'd like. A lot of them I went over very quickly because the things that are written on there, I'm not going to read you slides. You're all adults and all professionals. I don't need to read to you. You can do that yourself, I'm sure. We're going light because I want to make sure everybody's rested and ready to really tackle your final exams. The lecture is done, right? We got one more slide after this one, so it'll come in around 35, 36 minutes. There's a Dropbox assignment. That assignment is an outline. And if you remember outlines from back in, the 4th grade, you write an outline in bullet points, right? Normally it's, A, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3 with A and B and C underneath it, right? You're basically writing a section of an outline for each paragraph you would do if you were writing a paper. Don't write the paper. And there's always someone who tries to write the paper because they think it's a shortcut. They turn that in as their outline and think they're slick. Unfortunately, when I assign the paper, you don't know exactly what the assignment's going to look like. It may not look exactly. It's going to be close to your outlines, I'm sure, but it's not going to be exactly that. I can't do that because people do tend to try to write the paper and get ahead of the game, and then they have to go back, and I hate to have somebody redo work. So just do the outline this week and drop it in the Dropbox. Okay, you're using bullet points, and the assignment is explained out pretty well of how I want it written, although if you have a different method of outlining that you've learned that works for you, by all means you can do that. I don't have a problem with you changing the format slightly. Let's not get hung up on format. I'm more concerned about making sure that you understand what I'm asking for and you've given some thought to the different answers to the questions so that you might be able to use those going forward, at least partially. Use the opportunity to focus on one or two areas. You only need to write an outline on one, but I would suggest that you probably take 2 of the focus areas that I've given in the assignment and outline them both. It doesn't take but a couple minutes. Do it by hand if you want to on the second one. Just turn one in Dropbox and do the other one, however you want to do it, even if you just kind of go through it in your mind. Have a second one available in case I'm going to give 5 questions on the final, and there are 6 things that I've given you the opportunity to outline. I may drop one of them. So do one to turn in, do another one in your head or on paper, or just type it out so that you're ready for any 2 of those items. That's due on Sunday at midnight. We meet on December 7th at 6 p.m. for our final. Let me check that, and I will get back with you to make sure that is the correct date and time. I did put it on the class news, but I do want to double check that because we don't want to do that wrong. But our final is during finals week. You will need to be in person in the classroom for that. So here we go. It's minute 34. Put your outline in the Dropbox by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Okay? Just one of those focus areas is very self-explanatory, but if you have issues, please just give me a call, text, write, whatever, and I'll get back with you as soon as practical. I'm going to grade those relatively quickly just to make sure that there's no issues, that somebody, slipped through the cracks and just doesn't seem to be getting it at all. I don't think there's anybody in the class that didn't get, if you applied yourself, you're doing just great. But I want to make sure that if, somebody's outline really looks like they're not getting it and that they might falter in the final, as I promised everybody, I front-loaded this class. I don't think it's at all fair for anybody to go into a final worried about whether or not they're going to pass the course, unless they've just been dogging it along the way, then that's you doing you. But if you have applied yourself, I don't want anybody not doing well on that final. I think that's just silly. With that, it is the end of the semester. Okay, here comes a little bit of preaching. Eat right, sleep well, keep your mind clear. End of the semester, and it's getting Christmas time. Is the time everybody wants to go out and party. Okay, give me my dad moment here. Don't do that. It's finals week. Be your best self. Take good care of yourself as part of that. Watch the course news for updates, including confirmation of the time, the date and time for the final exam. If there is a conflict, and I know one of you may have a conflict with the final exam time because you took another Wednesday night course that was not a hybrid, so that you missed their class once per month while you were taking mine. But if there is another conflict with another course, please let me know. If there's a conflict with something else, you can let me know, but I'm going to probably ask you to try to fix that conflict rather than change dates or try to do your final a different way. Everybody knows it's finals week. You've made plans, I'm sure. So with that, have a great week. If you have questions, you guys know where to find me. Take care.